That but I think we have.
Assistant. If you didn't know it was, I don't see it.
Exactly. I'm from. Years. What's going on?
Nice community.
That's right.
You gotta look out.
Oh.
Visit someone with their exercise weeks.
Okay, we'll do it.
I haven't been able to see any pure plant. Boy, you.
We had big.
Something cool.
If we don't want it.
I golf course.
Got one for the city.
Howdy.
Yeah, I thought. There's their voice for visiting.
Well, I'm not.
Gotta give us. But I'm gonna have them. Because everything I have is.
I could.
Yeah, give me papers. Yeah.
Well, I don't.
Well, it's gonna work for that.
Yeah.
Not be no plan.
I'll be honest, I used to. Back 50 years ago. Hey there. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I wasn't. And if your house back. So I said it's really easy to just redid my last year.
Still there.
That never changes.
Must have been funny. My daughter puts in this. Jerry, you know this guy? What's it?
Oh, hi, neighbor. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Yeah, so when they reach.
Perfect.
Exactly, thank you.
Yep, still there. Yep, that's how we get done. How steep steps.
Let's try to miss it.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Windy.
My kids have been down to that.
You know, I like except it's cinder blocks, you know, and that's been. But we tried it something. One of our first motions.
Conversation. We want to see where it starts.
North of River Valley.
We're going to say, we're not that questions, because they're not coming. Cabin. I end up.
Yeah, I killed my wife every. Yeah.
You think that somebody reached out to I think it's just. There's.
Well, now the Iron Man.
I got it.
Who knows?
How are you?
We just did.
Water.
So, we feel like.
Once they started. They got the house all out. He's not, what they does their plan. Then the best person.
How you doing?
No.
We were over.
My road, I've seen it a couple times.
I've only been retired for 18 years.
Well, I think it's things.
I got it.
Yeah, yeah.
I know, right?
Economics of it.
No, that's actually, on the other side was the old conference room. On the other side is the old This was actually where.
My kids and my grandkids.
If someone dismiss your calendar. I think help.
Well, good evening, everybody. I think we'll get started. It looks like the line is down. Boy, I guess the word got out, huh? Great turnout. Thank you for coming in. Again, if you haven't signed on the check-in list, register, please do that before you go, so we just know who was here, name, address, and your email address, so we can kind of communicate any updates as we go. Introductions, I'm Kelty Clem, I'm the city administrator, so you might have got a postcard from me here a few weeks ago. We got John Pratt, city engineer, Renell Roberts, is public utilities general manager, Kyle Barber, county zoning, Larry Brennan, community development director. I try not to miss anyone. Ron Zeman's here, he's on city council. John Carlson's from the city council. Dan Josephson's hiding. He's on council too. Ellen Foltz is here. She's on our public utility commission. I think Sean King, our public works director, is hiding in the back too. And then Charlie Jackson is here too from Detroit Township.
Rob.
Oh, Rob's here. Rob Harrison's here, our water wastewater supervisor. So we'll kind of jump into it actually. All right. Technology working. We are streaming it, so. Okay. So you might be wondering why are you here? Why did you get a postcard from me? Really, this started off with really just kind of an informal inquiry. The city about feasibility of getting city water and sewer out to kind of south side of Floyd Lake. That kind of was initiated with what the county is going to be doing with septic inspections around Floyd Lake in the next year or two, and I'll have Kyle kind of explain that a little bit here in a minute. But really, it started with a call to City Hall about, what does it look like? What can we do for feasibility for getting water and sewer out? We had a meeting, Dave Pettis here too. We had, again, just kind of an informational meeting to kick around some different ideas. And Steve Evans is here too, been communicating with him a little bit. We said, I think it's time to get everyone in the same room, just to find out what the interest is for what water and sewer looks like. One of the things I want to do is put up a map. Hope this is kind of helpful to understand where our current utilities are located. Currently, we have water and sewer out on North Tower Road. So back when the jail project came in 2018, the city did a new water main and actually looped the water main from the west and east side from basically Richwood Road over Highway 59. A new sanitary sewer enforcement main was installed on Highway 59 to serve the jail area and the adjacent area around the jail, and really built it out with the idea that it could service areas beyond the jail property. So there's also probably been some discussion, you've heard about other development in that area close to the jail. I don't have a pointer here, but the intersection of 131 and North Tower Road is the Bristlin property. They have come to the city, they've had actually sought a plat for that to develop it with, again, city water and sewer. So that has been annexed in. A number of years ago, we also had inquiry from Broadlawn Estates. That's basically the neighborhood right kind of behind the town hall. They too inquired about water and sewer. There were a few property owners short of moving that project ahead. So point being, some of you might have been part of a discussion 20-some years ago about trying to get utilities to Floyd Lake. And the feasibility is better now than it's ever been. Again, with water and sewer on 131, if those other developments go through, you're probably looking at a lift station being installed somewhere on the south end of 131 serves the Bristlin property. And, you know, you're not that far off to where the area that we're talking about. A little bit about the project area. Basically, we sent out some notices from everyone on Berlin Beach Road and County Road 131, all the way back to Richwood Road. I did have a call from a couple of people on Idencheek Road. I don't know if anyone's here. Expressed some interest in it too. I don't know if we included them in the mailing or not, but they reached out, so they'd be included in this discussion too. Any questions about that? You know, I want to be clear, we're not proposing any type of project beyond kind of the south side of Floyd Lake for feasibility, really. Good.
I got a question.
Sure.
Why isn't Floyd Lake Point included on that?
Help me out with Floyd Lake Point.
It intersects with County 131.
Middle of the map sticks out.
That should have been included.
Yeah, they're included.
That should have been included.
They're included.
No word of that in any communication I've seen.
Okay. Well, realize that maybe wasn't a perfect communication of when we say 131 Berlin Beach Road. We maybe didn't get every one of these little stub offs off of the main road. Okay. Before I move on, you know, kind of what is the purpose of the meeting? You know, really, we're here to just have an open discussion. We're going to try to provide some information the best we can. We're going to try to answer your questions the best we can. If you're here and you want to know exactly what this is going to cost you, fortunately, we're not at that point yet. Okay? But we'll do our best to what we can give you for feedback on that. Again, we want to talk about some options, and more importantly, I want to talk about what this isn't. All right? The city is not here to strong arm anybody. Not here to strong arm anyone into any project. We were reached out with kind of, you know, there's an issue or a problem coming up, and what solutions can the city provide? And that's what we're here for. We're here to talk through some ideas, some suggestions, and see what comes up, what what's the interest in this room for moving ahead? So, yeah, what is the issue? Kyle?
Okay, so I'll just give you a little background on exactly what the county does. So since 2007, the county implemented a lake study. So we partnered with R&B Labs to test for nutrients, specifically chlorophyll and phosphorus, which is an impairment to our public waters. We tested 65 lakes. That's the data that we have. Floyd Lake, currently, the most recent data we have is from 21 on an index from 0 to 100 is a 43. The cleanest lake we have is Bad Medicine, that's a 34, and the most impaired we have is a 74, which is Tea Cracker. Again, since 2007, we looked at the most developed lakes, obviously. We looked at Melissa, Sally, the Cormorants, Cotton Lake, Bad Medicine, so on. But Floyd Lake has been basically left off the radar for the anticipation that you guys will at one time be annexed. We obviously didn't want to conduct this study, have you do inspections, and then, a couple of years later, the city annexes you, or you ask for that annexation. Over the course of the last year, I was contacted by the Floyd Lake Association. They had, one individual had some concerns about failing septic systems on Floyd Lake particularly. So that's basically what generated this conversation. We then reached out to the city and just said, hey, in the foreseeable future, what do you see for an annexation plan there? And, the likelihood of it was not without buy-in from property owners there. So essentially, that's where we are. Your lake hasn't been looked at, specifically for the fact that we didn't want to put a burden on you of fixing septic systems and then being annexed relatively soon after. Since 2007, I'd say we've done about 25 lakes. That's really how we got here.
What does it mean to be annexed?
I can get to that in a minute. When do you expect to do those inspections?
So, I mean, if there is no foreseeable annexation plan here, we would do it relatively soon,
So, why Floyd?
That,
Why Floyd?
it's one of the most populated developed lakes that hasn't been done. With a lot of low ground there, a lot of septic systems close to the water table. Not a lot of elevation surrounding that lake, so. And again, where we're gonna see most of our impairment is on, developed lakes, with a few exceptions of something like St. Clair that's been previously loaded with nutrients, but. Yes, sir.
Would it be important to do this assessment of septic systems in advance so that, homeowners would know if they have a problem, which might influence them, yay or nay, towards doing the water and sewer?
It certainly could, and that's just why we wanted to have that conversation. It started as a small roundtable discussion, but basically leaving some of this decision in your hands. And our office was contacted by the Lake Association, and now we're just trying to decide what is the most feasible route for you all.
I think to some degree, the challenge is trying to be proactive in that. If you go do inspections tomorrow, and it fails, it's gonna take a long time to kind of get the city process through, right? So by starting now and at least having discussions and trying to be a little bit ahead of the curve, if that's ultimately the.
Carl, do we know how many homes are in South Floyd?
No, I don't got that.
110. 110.
I mean, some of you in this room might know this better than we do, because you might have had to replace a septic recently. My understanding is there's some challenges with, especially if you have a small lot, you have water table issues on just what the feasibility is to actually put in a new septic drain field, or if you got to do a holding tank. Kyle or Tom, if you want to follow on that or not, but.
I'll expound to the degree that I can. I qualify that I'm not a drain field or septic expert by any stretch, but made no secret, I think everybody knows septic regulations have gotten to be
I'm
more.
sorry, could you speak up just a bit?
How about that?
Oh, thank you.
That better? Okay, as long as I don't swallow it. Yeah, septic regulations have just become increasingly more restrictive. Not surprising, and again, I'm not the world's expert on septics by any means, but you know, some of the factors that come into play with a traditional septic tank and a drain field is, you know, separation from groundwater. You have to have 3 feet of separation from the bottom of your soil treatment field to groundwater. Well, in a lot of cases around Floyd Lake, that's going to be a challenge. You don't have that separation just because of the topography. Some places will, but there's an awful lot that are very close to water table. So the 3-foot separation from groundwater is one wrinkle. The other ones are setbacks from wells and structures. There's a litany of various setbacks that you have to have from tanks, your septic tank and your drain field. From wells, for example, you have to be 50 feet. From buildings, you need to be, I think it's 10. You have to have separation from driveways. You have to be 100 feet from a shallow well. So a shallow well is typically considered to be something that's 50 feet or less. Then you're going to be 100 feet. Well, a lot of lots, particularly on the south side of Floyd Lake, are pretty small. And you start rolling all these things together, it could be challenging. I can't say that nobody's inventoried these to date. It's just sort of speculation that some are going to be a challenge to get a drain field in. Then you're looking at, you know, okay, you can sometimes sidestep some of those issues with mound systems where it's a pressurized system. A lot of times to get it by the 3-foot separation issue. I've heard different prices on those. The most recent, I talked to a septic installer the other day. You know, he said 20 grand plus or minus. I've heard numbers high as 30. And that's for a mound system. So I just think there's a number of issues that could come into play for folks as they move down this path. If you can't do a traditional drain field or you can't do a mound system, your last resort at that point is a holding tank. And a holding tank is just that. It's a tank and you have to pump it perpetually as you use it. So it's about my knowledge base on septics. I almost defer to Kyle and see what I screwed up here.
No, I don't think you missed anything. You going into business, it sounds like.
Nope.
Okay, so that's kind of the issue, right? So what does city water and sewer look like? I think probably the best thing to look at is recent examples, right? For Detroit Lakes, of course, we have Little and Big Detroit. More recently, Long Lake is probably our best example to look at. You know, in that case, we looked at some sort of phased construction plan. Again, if you look at that project area that we laid out earlier, that is more than one construction season worth of work. So we probably have to look at some sort of phased approach. We have to look at some sort of phased approach, whether, you know, we do a gravity system with lift stations or if it's some sort of low pressure boards made throughout. So it's not going to be all in one bite. So it kind of goes back to that comment earlier about starting early and trying to work through what that plan is going to be. On Long Lake, similar to that, we had basically had phased annexation. Basically coincide with the different construction phases. Yes, I used, you know, the A word, annexation, so that would require you to be in city limits to get city water and sewer. The process for that, you know, assuming that there is an 100% agreement, because there is a way that if you had 100% of the petition property owners, we could do a annexation by ordinance. However, on a project like this, that's never the case. So again, you look at Long Lake, where it was orderly agreement with Detroit Township. That would require Detroit Township to be a party to that orderly annexation agreement. There is still an option if for some reason The township wasn't a willing party. We could do some tested annexation proceeding. Then basically that would go through the state's Office of Administrative Hearings would have to hear that contested annexation. Assuming that there was enough support to actually do the project. Again, you never get 100% of the projects, right? So there is a process, but really the orderly annexation with Detroit Township would really be the best process forward. Do the annexation, basically start phasing the construction out. So yes, question comes with that. So you're part of the city. What happens to your property taxes? Not going to sugarcoat it. Property taxes will go up. Part of that you got to understand. Detroit Township, congrats to Charlie that's here. They do a very good job keeping the levy very small. They have a lot of tax base to spread that on around. So you have a very small levy, you have all the tax base, they have a very low rate. Now, city of Detroit Lakes, we have one of the lowest rates from all of our peer cities, but it's higher. Detroit Township. Okay, I've got my notes, but it's basically, you know, your rate is going from like a 7% to a 39%. What that means for you in the form of dollars, again, the township tax goes away and is replaced with the city tax, is about a 50% increase. So we ran numbers before you run out of the room here screaming. I like to defend the city a little bit, and obviously part of that comes with a lot of services that we provide at the city. We provide 24/7 police coverage. That's something that township taxpayers don't have to pay for. We have, yes, we both have roads and streets we have to maintain. We have a lot of streets in Detroit Lakes that we have to maintain. That's the second big part of the budget. I'm willing to bet our park budget alone is probably bigger than Detroit Township's budget. A lot of those services as city residents who enjoy, but also people outside of the city also enjoy those things. So again, as the city goes, we have a very competitive tax rate, but when it's compared to a township, especially a township that has a lot of property value, it's hard to compete with that. It's hard to compare. So glad no one jumped out of their chairs and ran out here, but annexation would be required as part of that water and sewer. So carry this out. So let's say, get the annexation figured out, we get the construction phasing going out. How do you pay for the project? Again, look at what we did with Long Lake. We do special assessments back to the property owner to pay for their portion of the infrastructure improvements. Those are on a 20-year term is what the city has typically done. And then there's an interest rate that's charged on that based upon whatever the city can borrow money for. When is hookup required? One of the challenging things when you do a project like this, everyone's age of septic and well is different, right? Some of you might just put one in, some might have one that's failing or near failing. So part of that is we do a 10-year deferral based upon when that was installed. So if you have a new septic tank installed this year, you'll be given a 10-year deferral to actually hook up. Is that right, guys?
Unless it fails first.
Unless it fails first.
On that.
Yeah.
What if there's a property that has an older septic tank or field? Will they be, is there a way of being grandfathered in because it's an older one, or is it strictly based on whether it fails or not, or will fail?
No, there's no grandfather. If your septic is, if we require you, we look at every septic system within 267 feet of the lake. If it fails, you have 10 months basically to fix it unless it's an imminent threat to public health, which means it has to be surfacing. Then it's only 30 days, but no, there's no grandfather. The only instance there that an option some people have is if the tank passes and the drain field fails, they go to a holding tank only.
What's the lifetime of a new septic system?
Depends on who's using it. How many?
On average?
25 years.
One of the things I forgot to mention on the property taxes, going back to the Long Lake agreement, one of the things that was part of that for the annexation agreement is that the property tax increase was phased in over a period of 6 years. So you wouldn't see that jump all in 1 year.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mel, do you want to say anything about electric utilities?
No, I think most of you in the room probably already are served by utilities, public utilities, electric systems, so. The only one that wouldn't be would be that little bit to the west end off of Rolling Beach Road there. That may be included in this, but it was annexed. We'd look at acquiring that and serving that as well, so. I think most of you have electric, city electric already.
I had a call earlier today too about natural gas service, so I'm going to defer to John on that.
Yeah, I did reached out to Minnesota Energy Resources this afternoon, frankly, because I didn't know what they had or didn't have out there in the way of natural gas. That's not a city utility, that's private by Minnesota Energy Resources. He sent me a map. I was actually quite surprised. They have a fair amount of gas basically around the south and southeast quadrant or corners of the lake at this point. The local representative that I talked to said that he would like to get natural gas around the whole lake. He's getting a little bit of resistance in two areas, not getting quite enough people to sign up where it sort of can be an automatic and he can just go ahead. And his management of the company is saying, no, not yet. And so he's sort of taking this in smaller bites at this point. No work this year, I think is what he said. Maybe some additional gas coming next year. I posed the question to him. I said, well, would you install that? Would it help your cause of getting natural gas in if there's an adjacent sewer and water infrastructure project? Because ultimately, we can do that cooperatively with them. It lowers their construction costs if they can do it at the same time. And he said, absolutely, that would help that cause. Now, that said, there's a good portion of the lake that on the map that he sent me that already has natural gas. So the answer is going to be kind of depends where you're at.
So John, I kind of oversimplified water and sewer install. Do you want to complicate it with engineering words?
I'm really good at complicating things. As far as what the construction looks like Kelsey said, we don't have any concept at this point of what the phasing of this would be, but it would be phased to some degree. The drivers on the phasing are, the constructability factors. Sometimes there's just nice starting and stopping points depending on how the system's laid out. Dollars and budgets can come into play with all of that, but we would phase it. Sewer and water installed around here will depend a little bit. The water is relatively straightforward. I mean, water mains go on the ground at about 9 feet deep. We drop service laterals off to every property, work with the property owner exactly where that service stub is put. It will be somewhat challenging with high groundwater. I mean, I would expect that we would have to de-water a good portion, if not all, of the length of the water main. But outside of that, water is fairly easy. It's pressurized. Sewer, there's a lot more questions as to how we would go about the sewer. I mean, what I would call a conventional sewer system is, a series of gravity mains that you flow out of your house down a gravity pipe to a gravity main. That gravity main ultimately dumps into a lift station that then pumps that up to a higher main or down a force main to another lift station, all the way back to the wastewater treatment plant. That's sort of the conventional approach. The challenge with that one is going to be, again, right back to groundwater. Lift stations are expensive, but to avoid lift stations, you put in deeper and deeper and deeper pipe. Well, the deeper and deeper we have to dig, the more expensive that dewatering goes. So it's kind of ends up being a balancing act of how deep can you get into the groundwater before that becomes ineffective or inefficient to put in. So those are all things we'd have to look at. There is another type of collection system out there that we don't generally use, but I think we'd probably at least take a look at it, is low pressure collection. What that is everybody has what's called a grinder pump, a grinder station. It's a small little lift station that everybody's house discharges to their own unit. And then that pumps it to in a low pressure force main. So basically the whole thing is forced in a low pressure force main type system. The advantage of that is constant depth. Again, you're putting those probably at 8 or 9 feet deep. And so we don't have to get quite as deep into the groundwater, saving on those dewatering costs. So those are all little nuances that we'd have to figure out as we go along. In addition to that, I'm probably getting a little far in the weeds here, is there's still that connection piece from those service laterals that we stub off the mains to each property. Homeowner then needs to, typically how this works is the homeowner then needs to go connect to those mains. We would probably at least explore the idea of developing some sort of a program where those private, what I call private connections, could be done as part of the work. And the advantage of doing that, we would need an easement from each property owner to do that work on their property. The advantage of that is the dewatering is already in place. And there's a pretty serious cost savings to sort of piggybacking on that dewatering while that main utility installation is happening versus you coming in 3 weeks after the backhoe's moved down the road and the dewatering's pulled out. Quick, easy math, probably just to get the dewatering set up to put in those service laterals could be $10,000. No pipe, no digging, just getting that dewatering set up. So there's a pretty significant advantage if we can somehow figure out a way to do that, I guess, cooperatively. But that's something we'd have to look at as we get down the road. So, miss anything?
What about seasonal houses? Is there a way to winterize them so that the pipes don't freeze?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we have, I should maybe let Vernell answer this.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of people that do that. So typically we'll pull the water meter out, blow the water back to the main, seal it off, put an air seal in there and winterize it for the winter. We have a lot of places that do that around the lakes and in the area. So that's pretty commonplace for us.
Is there any places, you always hear water and sewer. Since water is not the issue with sewer, they just do sewer. And so it can cost less to put in because it isn't, you're not doing both. So then there's some desire to have both. That part of it. I mean, do you have to be full city annexed or can it be partial?
Repeat the question.
His question is, do you have to do both water and sewer? I'm gonna let these guys jump in. My answer to that is, you don't have to. Annexation would be required for either one of them, because they are a city utility. I think a lot of times when you're doing the construction work, you're digging the trenches, there's cost savings to do the water at the same time, but guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of covered it. Have to? No, there's no regulation or other compelling reason that says we have to do both. It's the most cost effective if you ever think that you're going to, would be to do it at that time. Otherwise, you're doubling up on all that road restoration, all that dewatering, a lot of the engineering and administrative and permitting and things like that. So it really comes down into being most cost effective if you ever think you're going to do it. I mean, the risks that you run, if you were to play this out, you just do the sewer because, that's the issue at hand, is if down the road, any sort of contaminant starts to show up in the groundwater out there, which does happen. Things like arsenic and things like that can all of a sudden rear their head, and all of a sudden wells have contaminants in them, and then we're back at it. So it ends up being a bit of a dice roll, but the shorter answer is no, we could just do sewer. We've not to my knowledge, ever done that.
Yeah, we typically haven't, and it does complicate things a little bit from a billing because for sewer bill based on water consumption, so you'd have to figure out some sort of average base rate or fixed rate for the sewer consumption, but.
Yeah, if I can just piggyback on that, Kelsey, my recommendation, we do both at the same time, because not too far from where we're looking at here, there are some pretty poor water quality issues with well water. So, looking down the road, it's much more feasible and cost effective to do them at the same time. And then if something does show up in the well water, or the well water goes bad, or the well goes bad, the water availability is right at the front door.
Maybe you want to chime in, I mean, we've allowed wells to stay in for irrigation. A lot of them, like you guys might pump out of the lake anyways, but we've allowed those wells to stay for irrigation.
Yeah, our ordinances allow for wells to stay for irrigation purposes if you're not already drawing out of the lake for, lawn irrigation. As long as it's not cross-connected to the public water supply or cross-connected to the water inside the house. So yeah, if you choose to leave your well there, isolate it, use it for irrigation only, by all means, we don't have a problem with that. And the state allows that. We just have to know that it's there and what it is. Document and keep track of it.
Yeah, more questions.
Just to stay in line with the septic only plan, is there anywhere where it is just the septic? The interstate, generally you always hear it being both, but I'm just wondering if there is, and because there probably is. And then what the cops different would be, and it's not to defeat anything or to go one way or the other, just asking, because that's the issue with septic more than anything. At this point. And it could, in as far as like the well issue, that could be anywhere. You could be anywhere outside of the annexation and have a well issue, no matter where you go. And so you would have to have your water treated, reverse osmosis or whatever you need in your home. Recent well. But I was wondering if there's ever where it's just septic.
We have 1,500 water meters, and I have 3 that are septic only.
It's pretty limited. Alexandria, their sanitary sewer district is just sewer only.
Right, so around the lake, Alexandria Lakes area, that's managed by Alexandria Lakes Area Sanitation District, and they do just the sanitary sewer. They go all the way around, most around Miltona, a lot of the lakes around Alexandria and inside the city limits of Alexandria. So there are cases where it's a different sanitation district that takes care of the sanitary sewer versus the water. Then Alexandria Light and Power takes care of the electric and the water around the lakes in Alexandria.
So yeah, not common in the city, but elsewhere in the state, certainly there's other.
It is a possibility. And if that was a possibility, it may cost everyone less if they ended up. So you wouldn't be fully annexed. So if you live out in Alexandria, if you live on Lobster Lake and you belong to the public utilities where you get their septic system, you're still not part of the city of Alexandria.
The way that sanitary sewer district was set up was an orderly annexation plan to annex in considerable parts of that area, not all of it, but quite a bit of the area. So the city policy is we do not allow city services without annexation.
There's been a lot of talk about lake homes and going with that. Do you guys plan on incorporating the homes from Tower Road to the north towards the access that are outside that 267 feet?
In fairness, I don't know if we got a mail notice to this. We need to have the same type of conversation with those property owners. Now, if you're one of them or not.
So there's a few of them here.
Yeah, so we need to have that same conversation to find out what that interest is. Obviously, the water and sewer and annexation in that area is probably a little more imminent with the development of the property across the road. So it might be a little bit of a different situation than what those who are living on the lake is.
The short answer, I think that's John back there, is that's the route, right? From where we have infrastructure down to Floyd Lake. It also would be at least partially the route for the development of that Bristlin property. So
Correct.
Sort of in both cases, that area is kind of going to be adjacent to where water and sewer would run. So yeah, I think that that would have to come up, but like Kelsey said, that's probably another conversation with another group of people. A little bit different circumstances.
And I mentioned that broad line, you know, it's been a few years, we've had that conversation with them too, to see if there's still interest in water and sewer to them as well.
I'm starting to see a lot of dollar signs adding up and being a seasonal cabin. What happens with people like that that are just there 3 months of the year? Is there any discount or cut rate, or it's gonna cost us, you know, I know for the laying out the pipe, but man, if you're not using it, it just seems like it's unfair in a sense to be compared to your own facilities.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. I mean, the assessments are based upon a benefit in property owners, whether you're a seasonal cabin or you're a large all year round house. The assessments are going to be similar based upon really the size of the property. So no, you're not going to get a discount if you're just a seasonal property owner when it comes to the assessment. Now, I don't know on the utility side.
So on the water rates, if you winterize your cabin and blow back and take the meter out, we will suspend the service charge and fees on the water meter. But we just built a $34 million wastewater treatment facility, so the sanitary sewer charge is an unavoidable charge to recoup our capital costs for the wastewater treatment plant. That's $26 a month.
The other part is, what is your water source? Where do you get most of your water from? And how long has that been studied to see how long it's gonna last, or do you have reserves someplace else?
Oh, yeah, like we got that. 4 primary wells, 200 feet deep in an old aquifer. We know that the water that we get out of our wells is what we call old water. We do testing for aging on the water. It's several hundred years old, if not thousands of years old. We went through drought cycles. We see no diminishing capacity on those wells. I would say that we're positioned for water in this area, in this community for many years to come.
So, but you don't have a plan for the future or other alternatives?
Once we get to a population of 20,000 or better, I may have to put another well in. We have studied it for population to exceed 15,000.
Would that be the same location then, the same aquifer?
Yeah, we possibly could because the quality of the water is so good.
Your assessment, is it on your footage, front footage?
So this is probably going to go
Is
to,
it big and small the same, or is it?
I'm going to go back to the Long Lake example. A little confusing, and John, jump in here, but we split the assessment. So half of it was based upon front footage. So you're paying half of it based upon size of the lot, and the other half we're charging on a per unit basis. So basically, it was a mixed rate. So if you had a really large property, you weren't paying way more than everyone else, but you were paying a little bit more than everyone else. Because you have a large property, but yet the benefit of per unit, whether any house, you know, house to house, still getting the same benefit. So we blended the rate, so half of it was based upon size, half of it was on a per basis.
What happens with people that got back lots, that got property on back lots, plus their frontage, are they gonna be assessed double? How's that work?
That is normally how we do it. We would put a service over there too, and they would
Be a
receive,
double assessment,
they'd receive another assessment.
I see.
On that double assessment, how far away from the lake do you have to be before it doesn't affect you?
Just if you're abutting and getting the benefit of water and sewer.
So if you have a place across the road from the lake, but there's a lot in between you and where yours is, so you're not right on the road, you're back 200 feet because there's a lot in between you and the road.
Yeah, so if you're not abutting now, the caveat to that is if there was a way to get you service, property owner wanted service, or property owner wanted to develop acreage back off of 131, there's a way to get there and we can serve them, then of course you would get an assessment if we can service you. But if you're not getting a direct service line, you're not gonna be assessed.
Kelsey, is there a way to quantify the cost of this? And then when you quantify the cost, is there a way to communicate that cost so it's easier for us in the room to make a decision?
So let's maybe get to this next step.
Okay.
So a few things. We need to get to that point where we actually do some study and so we can answer those questions. A little bit of a chicken and egg thing here, but first we kind of need to know what the interest is. You know, Vernell and I, we gotta go back to our bosses and explain what the interest is from the neighborhood for doing the project. Now, whether that's some sort of petition or a survey, again, whether the city does that or the lake association does that, somehow we're gonna have to get some idea of what is real viability from the neighborhood that wants to do this. Then we have the cost of the feasibility study. If there was a way to get any cost participation, I think it goes a long way to showing our bosses that they're interested. Otherwise, you know, there's gonna be some cost participation probably from the city to do the study as well. So that's kind of where we're at. That was the whole point of this meeting, was provide as much information as we can, answer as many questions as we can. But now, knowing what you know, we need to get some feel for what the interest is from the neighborhood before we start actually spending dollars and doing studies.
Do the numbers show from lakes that have the public water and sewage, better water values? Or that they're not decreasing in the levels of non-treated lakes or non-processed lakes?
I think there's any studies. I mean, obviously phosphorus load and stuff like that's going to be improved when you don't have septics, especially if you have septics that are sitting right in the groundwater. You know, I've always had this conversation with Lake Detroit. It's not all about clarity, right? Because there's other things that impact clarity. You know, zebra mussels did a lot to improve clarity. That's not necessarily because water and sewer is there, right? So you got to be careful what you determine as improved quality. But yeah, as far as other nutrient loading into the lake, they'll make.
Yeah, I think the best case study for that is Big Little Detroit, when water and sewer went around the lake in the early 90s. You know, there was a lot of concern about that and the cost of that, but the water quality of Big Little Detroit significantly improved rapidly after water and sewer went in, and that was long before zebra mussels ever showed up in the area. So there's direct correlation to the water quality improvement when water and sewer goes in.
So, but if you only do part of the lake, does it make sense?
Yeah, take the best way to eat elephant is take a bite at a time, and this is one way to get that thing done is start and slowly work around it. This is just too big of an animal. I think you can do that all the way around the lake in one shot and make that work. Just too big of an animal. So let's take the bites we can and get our gains where we can.
You guys got to do a study yet on this. After you do that, let's say if there was a go on this, how long would it take before you'd start digging?
You know, I'm gonna go with, you know, best case scenarios that we get some feedback that there's interest. We do a study of feasibility on this. And everything still looks good and sort of everybody's on board or as on board as we're gonna get everybody. I would say the soonest you could see construction would be summer of 26 is probably the soonest you would see it. That would be a fairly fast tracked project in my mind. I mean, I see a path of starting this next summer. Not really. I mean, I think there's too much minutia to work through aside from the design. So I think 26 would be the earliest and on out from there.
So are the inspections held off until 26?
Yes, correct.
He said yes.
I was 26.
Well, if there's any implementation that you guys are gonna go that route, we're not gonna go down that road, obviously.
Kyle, you made a comment of inspections done and the failure is found, they had 10 months, right?
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that the county was going to forego that until the decision's made on how this is gonna play out, so to not put anybody in a bind. during
Right.
that timeframe.
Reading between the lines from Kyle is as long as there's some forward progress, you're gonna stand fast. And once if it dies on the vine here, then
Well, 100%. I mean, the county wasn't looking at this until your association contacted us and then basically, I want to just say forced our hand. They want to know why we weren't treating your lake as we were similar lakes. And it was like, well, we expected you to have city water and sewer a long time ago, and that hasn't happened. So then here we are. Ross?
Okay, I just wanted to say that, when we did these, surveys on Floyd Lake 15, 20 years ago, you know, we had a big impact of people that came in and wanted to be on the lake. But when they did the survey, it showed that, the percentage was very low at that time of who wanted to be on there. But since that time, we know a lot of you had trouble with your wells, a lot of iron in it. Also, you have trouble with your septic systems. But, so you'll know when you do this survey, that's definitely needed to see how many people really have interest. But we did Big and Little Detroit. The women of those families sold it to the city council just because of having clean water for laundry and cooking food and you name it. But also you look at a lot of houses, you know which houses had bad wells because their house was all yellow with iron. So it took a while, but eventually people also saw it as a way of trying to keep their lake clean. Because right now, we don't know how many of your septic systems are leaking into your lake. And we also found that on Long Lake too. They had the questions all, just like you have here tonight. But they find out now that the lake's a lot cleaner. They've got their fresh water. And like Kelsey said, you still can use the lake water for irrigating your lawn and all that stuff. But it all comes down, we need to get that survey to see what the interest is, but when you look at it in the long haul, the future of that lake, we know from towns that have put in sewer systems around the lake, that it does save your lake in the long haul. Someday you're gonna wish that you need it, and I say let's do it sooner than later, but that's all up to you whether you get surveyed.
You say to find an interest, who's people all interested, you send out a questionnaire, who's interested and who's not.
Be one option to do it, yeah.
I think that'd be probably the fairest thing because you don't want your neighbor to know how you're voting. Everybody with a questionnaire. It's ridiculous. I think that's the fairest way. Nobody wants to raise their hand when the neighbor here.
When they did it last time on Floyd Lake, they went, I don't know who the group was, but they went house to house. And, that's how they came back and so that's how they did it.
I don't buy any extended warranties. I go by my age now, so. I'm exceeded that already, so. I'm very interested in time period.
Do you know what the average assessment was for the Long Lake project? I know that was a few years ago, so obviously prices have gone up, but just.
That project was done in phases starting in 2003, and so people who got it done in 2003 certainly paid a lot less than the people who had it done in 2018. So I guess we don't have that number for you.
You can't give us a ballpark?
I can do my best here. I'm going off of memory on the last phase that we did. You know, I would say a typical assessment, I'm scouring my brain here, you know, 20 to 30,000 kind of where I put.
I think it was around 30,000. I mean,
Yeah, there were some that were less, certainly some that were more.
It's one of those things that best time to have done it is 20 years ago. The second best time is today, right? Because the cost keeps going up. So, you know, a lot of new subdivision costs, in the city were, you know, we're over $40,000 for assessments on a new subdivision. So take that for what it's worth.
A little closer to 50, I would actually argue now.
I mean, the cost has just gone up.
Yeah. I mean,
That's on 100-foot lot, is it?
yeah, I mean, when you look at a typical, that's a good way to phrase this, I think, a typical subdivision in a, you know, by Long Lake or any of the number of subdivisions that have been built. Yeah, your 100-foot-ish lots. I mean, I remember when assessments were 12,000, you know, and I've been at this for a little over 20 years.
I was gonna say, was that like 2018?
Yeah, something like that. And now I would say if somebody were to ask me on the street, you know, what's it gonna cost for assessments on a subdivision? My knee-jerk reaction is probably about $50,000 for, you know, street, sewer, water, storm sewer. That's a urban section roadway, so there's some differences here, but that just maybe puts it, you know, a little bit into perspective.
The dewatering is gonna make that go way more.
It absolutely could. It absolutely could.
Probably 60 to 70.
And again, part of that, you gotta remember, is sections. So in town, we're doing 36-foot wide street, curb and gutter,
Yeah.
Long Lake, those areas, we all did a road section road. So that's part of determining what that cost is.
Would it be feasible to do the septic study and then perhaps agree to hold off on the results until if people realize that they failed the survey, septic survey, well, that's going to give a lot more impetus, I would think, to them to join in the water and sewer situation. But if they don't know if they're going to pass or fail, I guess they'll just have to guess on.
Let me try to answer that question a little bit differently. I mean, Kyle, what would commonly be a reason for a septic to fail, right? By age?
Well, one of the major things is in the last 10 or 15 years, the MPCA has become way more restrictive on that soil, the bottom of the distribution media, as John had touched on, and between periodically saturated ground. So they used to be, again, a lot less restrictive on that. They've become much more restrictive. And through that education process of training all of these guys to be basically soil scientists, are showing that that periodically saturated water table is a lot higher than what they would have thought back in 2007 or even 2012. So mainly why they're gonna fail is because of that. So if they're installed prior to, I'm gonna say 2017, and they're not a mound system, they're not a holding tank, they're in ground, there's a high likelihood they're gonna fail.
Carl, I've got a question for you, because we're talking time here, and time is money with inflation. But as I know you said you won't be doing a study till 2026, is there a way that you could move that up a year to get going on after this next year?
We can do it whenever, but we definitely wanted the buy-in from the residents. Again, we were contacted, and the reason is, okay, why haven't you done it? You've done all these other lakes. Well, because of the thought of the folks being annexed and then having the burden of us doing that and then you coming right behind. So I mean, I'm not gonna say we're gonna go back and just force this down anybody's throat. We're not looking to come next year. We just wanted to generate the conversation and get back to those people that generally were asking us, why are you not doing it?
Sir, does that make sense? My point is, you can,
I just think people would really like to know ahead of time if, you know, what the position is, because they'll have a choice to make, and I'm not sure how long the county will put off.
yeah, and I think my point is, so if you know your septic, and you know where the location is,
Well,
you can probably connect the dots
I'd hope so.
on whether or not you're gonna pass that inspection.
Is there any percentages out there on recent studies on what failed and what didn't fail?
No,
By numbers?
no, but typically when you see a lake such as Floyd Lake or, again, going back to the populated one, there's point of sale. So Tom Bank will require a septic system inspection. So if you're seeing a lot of turnover on those lakes, they've most likely been looked at. And if there's been a lot of redevelopment on those lakes, they've most likely been looked at.
I don't know where I was at anymore.
I was just gonna ask, if you did the inspections now and they failed, to his point of understanding whether it's failed or not, would you require that to be fixed within 10 months?
Yeah, so the reporting, actually, that's a state statute, that's an MPCA requirement. They're private inspectors, and once they determine, if they determine your system fails or passes, they have, I believe, 30 days to report that, under their guidance.
If you do the formal inspections that it fails, based on these timelines, you would have to put a new septic in, regardless of whether city sewer and water was coming or not.
Right.
Did everyone hear that and understand that? So you're saying if you do the inspections now, they have to report that within 30 days to the MPCA if it's a failed septic. So your timeline for having to do something really gets expedited. So again, I think that's why Kyle's saying, again, use some common sense, think about maybe where your situation is. He's trying to help you out and hold off on doing the inspection so you can kind of vet this option.
You had an inspection 5 years ago. Are you required to have another inspection? You passed just fine.
No, if you've had an inspection or a septic system that's been installed within the last 10 years, you wouldn't get a letter until that 10 years exceeded. So if it was installed last year, you have 9 years to go.
Say if there was a sale of a property and you had to have an inspection and it passed, it was not a new tank, but the old tank passed, is my question, does it gotta be inspected again?
Did it pass an inspection?
If it passed, so basically for point of sale or redevelopment of the property, septic system that's installed today is good for 5 years. An existing system with an inspection is good for 3 years. But in reference to the lake study, if you or your neighbor had a system, inspected 5 years ago, we're not gonna request that inspection for an additional 5 years. It's kind of complicated, but.
So the county wants to do it for 10 years after that point of sale inspection. But if you sold it, anytime after 3 years, you have to do another re-inspection.
Now, the inspectors, where do they come from? Who are they?
They're all local. Well, I couldn't say that. You can hire one from any place in the state of Minnesota, but mostly Tri-County area, Otter Tail, Becker, Monoman, Hubbard.
Sure glad you're here, Kyle, because I would never.
In regard to annexation, realistically, with our proximity of Floyd Lake to the city of Detroit Lakes, isn't it kind of inevitable at some point in time it's going to be annexed?
I mean, I think it's been talked about for a while. Larry, what's your line? You've been here how long? And it was one of the first things you were supposed to do, right?
I've been here longer than most people care to remember. When I was back in 1998, I had my first meeting with the Floyd Lake people who wanted to be annexed to the city and have city sewer and water. So I thought Floyd Lake was going to be the first lake that we annexed. It turned out to be Long Lake. So it can happen anytime. It's Redmond's rule of planning is it depends. You never know what's going to happen because it depends on who's going to come forward, who's got the septic system that's failing, how many people have a septic system that's failing all at the same time. So there's a lot of factors that make that happen. But is it inevitable? I think so. When that might happen, I can't tell.
So as I mentioned before, we're in a better position to actually, from a feasibility standpoint, now that we have really trunk, water main and sewer main up on North Tower Road.
Question about holding tanks. So some of the older holding tanks may be leaking. Are they required to have a inspection?
Yes.
He said yes.
What happens if you have a home and a guest cabin on the same property? Can you run those on the same line?
They're on the same parcel.
On the same parcel.
On the same parcel, it could be one service, 1 meter.
And run both of them on that line?
Yes.
Yes.
If they're separate parcels, then we want separate services to them, but if they're all on one parcel, then you could.
What if they were separate? There were 2 50-foot lots and they put them together. And now they're 100 feet.
I think you still could do it.
Yeah, it was a combined parcel. You can get by with one service and serve both those cabins off of one service. It was under joint, one common ownership.
Okay.
So to kind of wrap up, again, I think the challenge here is how to gauge that interest. Again, city is here to help coordinate that any way we can, but of course, it's gonna be better hearing from your neighbors than from me. So if there's any way to help get that word out or assist in that process of, again, whether it's some sort of survey or petition, I think that's the route to go. Again, if you need assistance and want me to help put that together, I can certainly do that, but I think if you're trying to get signatures or you're trying to get people with complete information, it's gonna be better hearing it from you guys than probably from me.
There's another part to this. As soon as we get city sewer and water, when city sewer and water was run along Tower Road, there's a subdivision, and you referred to that Bristol subdivision, was approved 224 plexes up on the hill, 65 more single-family homes in that little 17-acre subdivision. The reason it hasn't probably gone through is because of the lift station. Think about all the land that's undeveloped behind 131. Could you be inviting a lot more development? Because you don't see contractors putting an apartment building on a septic system, but as soon as there's city sewer and water, it's open season for development. Then you really don't have control, and
I might disagree with you on that because whether Floyd Lake annexes or does the project or not, that development is likely going to occur anyways.
oh, no, that's,
It's not being held up specifically for that lift station because we can put a lift station and service just the Bristol subdivision. And there's been interest in doing that. So I wouldn't make your decision depending upon whether that area is going to get developed because it's probably going to get developed either way.
no, I understand that, that's already done. But all the other areas, you should think about what's behind your place, the Anderson subdivision. You could run, like you mentioned, you could run sewer and water in. One area in south of Detroit Lakes off South Shore Drive. I think there's a 6-story apartment building going in. It's just some of the other thoughts that could happen.
It's not a 6-story, but.
Well, it said something like that in the paper, didn't it?
Believe everything that's in the paper.
Okay.
Yeah, it was rezoned RM for multifamily, which up to a 4-story. Yeah, I mean, some of the other property, you mentioned the Anderson property, again, that's already been subdivided. So my question is, I think those were lots, 1.5 acre lots. So yeah, they can get water and sewer. If they don't, they're gonna do well in septic. So would you rather have them be on city services behind you or have 12 wells and septics that you're sharing with? I mean,
There's an old saying that says you can pay me now or you can pay me later. Eventually, will probably end up happening because they're gonna be like other lakes, that your lake needs to be clean. And that's what Detroit Lakes and Long Lake found out, is keeping their lake clean, pristine. That's what they're. You got people leaking into your lake right now, you don't know. And what's that gonna look like 25 years?
all right, one last call for.
I got a question.
Yeah.
How about the west side of Long Lake? It was annexed in about 20 years ago. They're your residents and they have standard wells, sewer systems to this day.
Yep.
Nor do we expect them to ever get those services out there in our lifetime. My question is, when they fail their system, septic system, what is done to that?
So we've had kind of a meeting just like this, because they are in city limits. We said, do you want water and sewer? It's gonna be expensive to get out there, because it's really the feasibility is difficult. But they said, yeah, we'll do it, we're willing to pay the price, we would have got water and sewer to them, but their response is, we don't want water and sewer right now, we think the cost is too high, they're generally in good shape. So the city didn't proceed with putting water and sewer to the west side of Long Lake, even though they are in city limits.
My question though is, when they fail their system, their septic system inspection, what is done about it?
They replace it.
There's your answer. I represent the township, I'm sure.
That is a different area out there, Charlie. I mean, there's lots of different sizes, the topography is different. So.
They say they encourage more development around the lake. We don't want no more people in our public access to come in there, so. Let's talk about our lake, not sub-developers, because we got enough people on our, coming in on our access now, so to me, doubling it doesn't make sense for me.
But
What kind of percentage of support would be required for that feasibility?
I don't know if there's a magic. Yeah, I don't know if there's a magic number. You know, really it's, part of that is back to, you know, what Cornell and my bosses want, if we're gonna be picking up part of the tab of that cost of that study, how much support are they comfortable with moving ahead with doing the study? Again, whether that's 50 or 60%, we never quantified it.
Early annexation, what's the requirement? Assuming that Detroit, like, the township of Detroit is on board.
Well, I mean, I think that's the same thing for Charlie, the township supervisor, to want to do an orderly annexation. He's gonna want to know what the support is in the neighborhood too. Again, is there a magic number to it? Was there a magic number when Long Lake did it? No. But they're gonna want to have some gauge and there's general support for it. They're gonna agree to an orderly annexation.
And I'm gonna say for that deal on Long Lake, that would have been done, that piece of land that we were looking after developing for housing. Strata took over and it was a gravel pit. They said in the next 25 years, it's gonna be hauling gravel out of there. So that's the reason why that west side wasn't extended for that reason. Otherwise, that would have been done, would have had that access area down there filled in with housing.
How did it play out in Long Lake with the annexation in 2018 in terms of the percentage of homeowners that were supportive and those that were opposed?
Well, that orderly annexation agreement was signed back in 2003. So that fate was determined 15 years earlier.
But do you remember what the percentage of support was?
This is before my time. I mean, the driving factor of Long Lake.
Before my time, but there wasn't any percentage of people that were polled to decide when the annexation would occur. What happened was we had a property owner that wanted to annex on the east side of Long Lake. And we got together with the township and talked about orderly annexation so that people would know when annexation was coming, so they could time whether or not they should repair their system or put in a holding tank, because they knew when annexation was coming. So it was helpful for people. And I think people who initially didn't like the idea of orderly annexation grew to like the idea of orderly annexation because it let them know when things were going to be happening.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was quoted 40,000 for a new septic system. I think we are all probably on the verge, if not now, in the next 10 or 15 years, gonna have to replace our systems. Maybe not all of us, but a ton of us. But it's an old development. Floyd, that region of Floyd was one of the first areas that was developed cabins in the Detroit Lakes area. It was convenient, easy to get to. So I think there's a lot of old systems out there, and it does seem like now is a really good time to at least take a hard look at this as an opportunity. And if we decide not to, well, that's the way it is, but I think we should take a good look at it and give it consideration.
Okay.
You think about a nice postcard. Why don't you send out a postcard again on all the interest here and see where we're at?
And include the people from Tower Road to the north. Most communications, please.
Okay, we'll stick around. If you have any questions, feel free to come up and ask us. All right, thanks for coming.